Mr. Neguse, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ranking Member Raskin and Mr. Knott. Nice to meet you.
Happy birthday.
Thanks. I appreciate that. So many birthday salutations. I appreciate that. I guess I want to start on the point that my good friend from South Carolina referenced around some of the challenges that we face as a country and in ways that I think the Congress ought to step in to address some of these challenges. One bill in particular, H.R. 2240, so this is the reporting bill, Mr. Knott, you'll see on the third page in the findings section, subparagraph 5, I'll just read it here, it says, and I'll quote, "A data collection that represents the full circumstances surrounding violent attacks and ambush attacks on law enforcement officers is vital for the provision of needed federal resources to federal, state, and local law enforcement officers." Do you see that language?
I did.
All right. And I presume you agree with that.
Sure.
And I certainly agree with that as well. Have Republicans in the 119th Congress passed any legislation to support or increase funding for local law enforcement?
To this point, I don't believe so.
Have Republicans in the 119th Congress passed any legislation to support or increase funding for state law enforcement?
To this point, I don't believe we have, no.
Have Republicans in the 119th Congress passed any legislation to increase funding for federal law enforcement?
Reallocated, but increased, no.
Yeah, no increases.
Yes.
Right? So no increases for the FBI, no increases for federal law enforcement, no increases for state law enforcement, no increases for local law enforcement in Colorado or North Carolina, of course, the state that you serve. This is Police Week. I think we should be supporting local law enforcement. I think we should be supporting state law enforcement. I think we should be supporting federal law enforcement. I wish Republicans in Congress would have brought to this committee and to the full body some legislation that would increase resources for local, state, and federal law enforcement. But regrettably, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have failed to do so. And it's about midway through the first year of the 119th Congress, or the session of Congress, I should say. If anything, I think as you're probably aware, Mr. Knott, the administration has done the exact opposite, right? So they have decreased funding for local law enforcement and state law enforcement, which I suspect you're aware of.
Well, they have decreased the amount of money that's going to Washington, D.C. The amount of dollars that are going out into the states is actually forecasted to increase. For instance, the FBI, I believe it's roughly 30 to 40% of FBI dollars are concentrated in Washington, D.C. And Director Patel, the president, they are hoping that those dollars will go out into the communities.
Let's unpack. I've got some questions about the FBI in particular, around, just given your prior experience as a former federal prosecutor.
Sure.
So, but before we get to that.
But getting out of Washington is a priority.
I hear you. Let me start with the state and local law enforcement piece, because I want to make sure I understand this right. So you're aware, earlier this year, this is just about 6 weeks ago, the Trump administration terminated 373 grants, law enforcement grants. This totals about $800 million worth of funding. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
Okay. Are you familiar with a program called the Rural Violent Crime Reduction Initiative?
The specifics of it, I'm not.
Okay.
No.
So the Rural Violent Crime Reduction Initiative funds intermediary organizations that deliver financial assistance directly to dozens of rural law enforcement agencies across the country, North Carolina, Colorado. This is a program that the Trump administration ended. Were you aware of that?
Well, they rescinded the grant.
They rescinded the grant, correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay. And you're comfortable with that?
Well, if there's duplicative dollars, if there's bureaucratic measures, if there's wasteful spending, then
Is it
absolutely.
your view that funding to rural law enforcement agencies, so these are sheriff's departments in my state or your state, are duplicative?
Well, I would have to look at the specifics of that particular grant.
Okay.
But I do know that I have spoken with law enforcement, and oftentimes a federal grant comes with more strings than they can count. And the bureaucratic cuffs that are on those from Washington, especially over the last few years, have been so paralyzing that they couldn't actually use them.
I will say that the law enforcement in your state respectfully seems to have a different view than the law enforcement that I visited with in my state. These are rural sheriffs, rural counties that have benefited from programs like this that help law enforcement, frontline police officers, and sheriff's deputies doing their job every day.
We all support.
Sir, let me finish.
Well, we all support local law enforcement.
I hear you. I'm not accusing you of not.
Yes.
I'm just simply saying you said that it sounds like, and again, I'm not going to restate your testimony, based on your conversations in your jurisdiction, that
Yes.
some of them believe it's duplicative or there are too many conditions and so forth. I'm simply saying, in my state, in the law enforcement that I've visited with, they are very concerned that a rural law enforcement initiative funded by Republican and Democratic administrations for years has now been unceremoniously terminated by the Trump administration. And to them and to me and to my constituents, that's not supportive of law enforcement. But I'll give you another example. This is a program. It's called the Officer Robert Wilson III Preventing Violence Against Law Enforcement Officers and Ensuring Officer Resilience and Survivability Initiative, otherwise known as the Valor Initiative. This is a program designed to improve safety and wellness of law enforcement officers across the country. It's been in existence for 15 years. That includes the first Trump administration, includes the Obama administration, includes the Biden administration. This is a grant program that is designed to prevent suicide prevention among law enforcement officers. The Trump administration terminated it. You're aware of that?
I am.
And you're comfortable with that termination?
Again, the specifics of that grant I'll have to do a deeper dive into, and someone in the administration would probably be better able to explain why they did that. But I do know that there, as you were well aware, there is duplicative spending. There is wasteful spending. And if rescinding some dollars so that they can better appropriate, write a better grant, if they can have a program that more efficiently designates dollars to those specific needs, that's a worthwhile undertaking.
Well,
no one is for increasing a suicide rate, obviously.
No one's accusing you of that, Mr. Knott,
Sure,
and I was
sure.
very careful not to do that, obviously.
Yes.
What I'm suggesting to you, and I hear you, I'm not, as you said, obviously asking these questions of an OMB official and of the administration officials is something I think the Appropriations Committee will certainly do. I'm
Yes.
just simply suggesting to you, $800 million,
Yes.
almost $1 billion in local law enforcement grants. And I'm not going to go through each line by line with you.
Yes.
But it feels like the same response I'm getting from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle as I walk through these terminations of grant programs that go to local law enforcement is the same answer that, well, these may be duplicative, they may be repetitive or bureaucratic and all the like. Again, I will just simply tell you, real consequences
Sure.
for local police departments and local sheriffs in rural parts of our country, including the areas that I represent and many of the areas that my colleagues represent. And I think this is not a prudent or sensical approach for the Trump administration to take. And the fact that I can't find, I guess, any of my colleagues on the side of the aisle to take issue with these rescissions, particularly during Police Week, I think is regrettable. But Mr. Raskin has been wanting to jump in here, so I'm
May
going
I
to come
respond
back.
briefly? May I respond briefly?
Sure, go ahead.
If I may respond, just we as a party, we as a Congress, we must support local law enforcement. We are dependent upon local law enforcement at every level. And this administration, despite the snippet that you just gave, supports local law enforcement and
This is the
federal law
snippet,
enforcement.
but go ahead. This
And
isn't a snippet. I mean, sir,
There
that
is
was not.
there is one party that has advocated very consistently, with the exception of January 6th, at defunding local law enforcement. That is not this administration. It's not the Republican Party. And so I think all of us would do better to get together and to collectively determine how we can best serve all of law enforcement. And I'm willing to do that at any time.
And I appreciate the exchange and the back and forth. And I would simply say first, not a snippet. What I was describing to you, and we can go through line by line, but I don't. The chairwoman has indulged me, and so I don't want to abuse her generosity in terms of the time that I will take during my questioning. But nearly $1 billion in over 300 grants to local law enforcement, in my view, not a snippet. Secondly, I would just say,
Well, far more than
Sir,
800
I
million
let you
was
finish.
cut
Let me
following the George Floyd riots
Sir,
at a
let
local
me finish
level.
my statements.
Far more.
Again,
Yes, sir.
I wasn't asking you a question. So I will just also say, this is a statement. The fact that Republicans, as you testified at the outset, have not brought a single bill to the floor for consideration to increase support for local, state, or federal law enforcement, and the fact that that has happened simultaneously to an administration that is gutting grants to local law enforcement does not suggest to me a position that is supportive of local and state law enforcement. I am here telling you, as a member of the committee that we both serve on, the Judiciary Committee, I am eager
Yes.
to increase funding for local and state law enforcement. I've introduced a bill, Project Safe Neighborhoods Reauthorization Bill. It's probably a program you're familiar with, given your years as a
I
prosecutor.
look forward to looking at it, yes.
And that's a program that the Trump administration has unfortunately gutted, but it's an example of an effort that I think is worth pursuing. Mr. Raskin, I apologize, I've neglected to give you an opportunity to opine here on this as well.